Bob Murphy Show, episode 428.
There's a tidal wave coming. What you gonna do?
Get ready for another episode of The Bob Murphy Show, the podcast promoting free markets, free minds, and grateful souls. It's your source for commentary and interviews conducted by a Christian and economist. Now here's your host, Bob Murphy.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Bob Murphy Show. Today I'm speaking with Scott Horton, who I'm sure many of you already know, but he's executive director over at the Libertarian Institute. He's an editor at antiwar.com. He's the author of many books, most recently Provoked. And speaking of that title, with Daryl Cooper, Scott is also the co-host of a new podcast called Provoked. And specifically, we jump in and I sing Scott's praises. He recently did a 3-hour-ish interview with Tucker Carlson, and it was the best I've ever seen Scott. And so we talk about that for a bit. I try to ask Scott, whenever I have somebody like him, that's, an OG in the liberty movement that I know many of you would have heard countless times before, I try to ask questions that you haven't heard him ask before. And I don't mean like, do you have any food allergies? You get the idea. Stuff that's relevant to his expertise, but that is not just his standard stump speech, as it were. And I did ask my supporting group for some thought on that. And if you want to be a part of that group, by the way, just go to bobmurphyshow.com/contribute. So anyway, I would like to say, even if you've heard Scott a lot and you're wondering, should I listen to this? We get into stuff, I've asked him stuff that I haven't heard him talk about before, or things that you hear quickly and I just want some more elaboration, that sort of thing. So we cover a lot of ground in this interview, and I think you're going to like it. My discussion with Scott Horton. Scott, welcome back to the Bob Murphy Show.
Thank you so much. Good to be with you, Bob. And I'm sorry I missed you at Pork Fest. They were like, hey, did you see Bob's great thing up there? And I was like, oh, Bob was here? And then I never did see you.
What day is the week were you there?
I was there the whole time.
Oh, you were there? You're going to think I'm just saying this. I swear that I was walking around, and I think you gave a talk from the pavilion, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I did hear you. I had my kid with me, and it was like I was taking him to the pool or something. So anyway.
Whatever. Good to see you again, though.
Yeah.
Even virtually here.
I heard you. Nice to hear you from 1,000 yards.
There you go.
Okay, so the reason I had to get you back here, I texted you when it happened, and I just want to officially say here with the people that if they have not seen you on Tucker Carlson's show, they need to go watch that. That is the best I've ever seen you do. And as I tweeted, I don't know if you saw it, I said something along the lines of, if you've been supporting the Libertarian Institute these years and buying Scott's, but it was worth it for you to have had your career and write all the books you did and everything just for that 3-hour performance that so many people have seen. And I'm not saying that merely to kiss your butt. It's I mean that.
Well, I appreciate that a lot. It was, it went about as well as I could have hoped.
I'm sitting there watching. I was like, I don't know if I could talk about monetary history for 3 hours like that. Cause you were like the James Michener of you were going into subplots and talking about various people, but you struck the right balance where it was perfect that you were going into enough detail so the viewer would know, oh, this guy's not bluffing. Like maybe I disagree and, some other expert would totally disagree with this framing he's doing, but this guy's not just speaking in generalities. But yet you kept coming back to the main narrative enough. So I think people weren't getting lost. I really thought you struck that balance there better than I've ever seen you do. So,
well, thank you, man. I appreciate it. I mean, honestly, it is the same enough already speech I've given a lot of times and done in a lot of interviews and this is when I finally decided really to write the book, is I could have told you the story of all the wars, but when I finally thought that I had my own timeline in my head complete enough to tell it all as one big story, is when I went ahead and started writing the book. So yeah, to me, it is one story. So that's what I'm trying to keep you on the thread is we got this Sunni Shiite split and we keep switching sides in the damn thing. And a lot of times, not so much unintentionally, but with the consequence, the results, the opposite of what the government intended, and then leading to the next crisis and the next and the next. So,
And then why don't I also say, just sort of an announcement for maybe some of my sheltered listeners don't know this. What's interesting is, so there's that track, and I'm doing my Scott Horton downloads periodically, and this is great because obviously when foreign events are happening, geez, we're possibly getting into a war with Iran here. That's when I listen more to your stuff than I normally do, and that sort of thing, just because I'm econ finance guy.
Sure.
And the other person, of course, I've been downloading a lot is Daryl Cooper, and I just recently heard he re-uploaded his thoughts on Ukraine, like he originally did, I think, soon after Putin invaded. And I'm just hearing stuff there that I just have never heard before. And then, so the two guys I go to, and you guys now have your own podcast. So it's like, there goes my free time.
Yeah,
so
that's great.
Can you just give a plug for that for people who haven't heard that announcement?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So Daryl named it Provoked. I wouldn't have. But yeah, so it's me and Daryl. And so far we're doing once a week. We'll see how it goes. We both have a lot of jobs, especially me. We've done 3 so far. The third one premieres tonight, where we talk about Jeffrey Epstein for an hour and a half, because he's done a 6-hour podcast on the issue. So, he has a lot of detail. And
what's interesting about that is that was right on the cusp before Daryl, became infamous with his first appearance on Tucker there, where he was, doing the Winston Churchill thing. So it was, people were telling me about, I had heard, Dave and you talk about his Fear and Loathing series, but then other people were telling me, yeah, Bob, with this Epstein stuff, you got to listen to this Daryl Cooper guy. He makes a compelling case that he was tied to Mossad and blah, 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 blah. And I listened, so anyway, I'm just saying, he has all these independent, if he had just done any one of them, he would have been known for that. And yet this is the same guy.
Yeah. And for people who especially have long drives, and things like that, I cannot recommend the Martyr Made podcast enough. He has these incredible deep dives. That's why Tucker called him the most important historian in America right now. He really is. He did this thing. I like to make fun of him and call him a commie simp, because he did this thing all about the miners of West Virginia and the wars, and Mother Jones and all that. And then we talked about the Epstein thing. Of course, he did Fear and Loathing in the New Jerusalem, which is 30 hours or something on leading up to 48 and the creation of the Israeli state. It's really fascinating stuff. And then he's got a whole thing on Jim Jones, and he has a whole thing called Blacks and Jews. And I know that people get all upset at Daryl and think they totally misunderstood him from what he was saying.
I know. I did chuckle because all right, and you've said stuff publicly, so I don't to take it, but sometimes it seems like he sticks his chin out. But like that one too, someone's like, well, geez, I heard this guy was a, pro-Hitler. Let me just go see what, he's got a whole series on blacks and Jews. I don't know.
Yeah. And then you listen to it and it's there's nothing hateful about it at all. He's just
I know, but it's just
about
funny.
How all the blacks moved to the city and how the Jews of New York were in charge of the schools and how they dealt with the influx and whatever. And but has nothing to do with
it. It's just, was this your, because I grew up in upstate New York, and it was very, I guess liberal might be the right word. I don't know what your word to use, but I'm just saying I grew up thinking the phrase "the Jews" never left my mouth. I don't know, for the first 30 years of my life. I was just trained to say, and anyone who uses, as opposed to saying the Jewish people or people who are Jewish, that was the way you would say it. And the only people who'd said the Jews were people who hated them and loved Hitler. That's
or
really
Jews themselves would say, is it good for the Jews? And I would always say, my whole life, I always would say, well, which ones? I always hated the word a people. I was like, what? That doesn't make any sense, dude. I don't offenses against basic reason like that. I'm a individualist.
But to be clear, you're right. Stand-up, Jackie Mason goes, and then the Jews came, and then that was fine. But just black people can say the N-word, but I certainly could, So anyway, I'm just saying.
It is all context, because if you're talking about, so in Hungary in 1941, the Jews, right? They were forced to the east,
you could say it like that,
or rounded up and shot, or whatever it was.
It could
so
be
we know which
statement.
ones you're talking about. You're talking about the Hungarian ones at that time.
Right.
It's totally different than saying the Jews, all the Rothschilds and all of their secret associates at the top of the evil pyramid that controls everything. Or whatever.
So just for people at home, you can say the Jews were oppressed in the 1930s. You can't say the Jews run banks.
Have power. Or if you do,
control Hollywood. You can't say that.
You know, what I really like is the way Eric Garris put it. He goes, man, you've got to learn to discriminate, not against people, between people.
Yeah, that's funny.
You know?
Yeah.
Which individuals are we talking about and which companies that they own?
That was actually my, in a completely different context though. That was, do you remember, Scott, it was, I guess it must have been right after the invasion of Iraq, the second time, where there was a thing going around where people would say, do you support the troops? Like that was the catch up, you know, the gotcha phrase or whatever. And so I was thinking through, like if I was ever debating somewhere, like what would I say? And so I came up with, I don't know if this would have worked. It never happened, but I prepared myself. I thought I was going to say not all of them, because then that would put them on their heels. So you say, oh, are you defending all of them? And then like even the ones, you know, torturing guys and whatever and taking pictures of their genitals, you know what I mean? So anyway, that was, I fight little battles in my head that never come. I'm like the military planners.
You know what? I bet that's come up a couple of times. And there's always the obvious answer is that, well, there's a couple. One, they take the money right out of my paycheck. Don't pretend I have a choice. And then two, if you really care about them, then you would oppose this war where they're sent to get exploded to death for nothing. You know, fighting a war for oil for Israel and to put Iran's best friends in power in Baghdad and to empower Osama bin Laden's friends in the Western, predominantly Sunni areas of the country. And what does America get out of any of this? Nothing. And, you know, they used to write letters to the editor. And this was my job at antiwar.com back when, you know, in the, especially like say 03, 04, or no, not 03, but like say 04, 05. And they would say, we're over here fighting for these people's freedom and fighting for Americans' freedom. And how dare you even have a website called antiwar.com and oppose what we're doing here? And then I would write them back and I would say, you're not fighting for freedom. You're fighting for Abdul Aziz al-Hakim, the leader of the Supreme Council for Islamic Revolution in Iraq and their Bada Brigade. And you think that they work for you, but you work for them. And you're fighting a civil war for them. And freedom doesn't have the first thing to do with it. And then they would write back and say, oh, actually, that is right. I know that name, Hakim and Skiri and Badr. That is who we're fighting with against the terrible terrorists who are opposing freedom. But yeah, maybe you have a point here. And then it's just...
That's great. I was actually going to make a joke and say, oh, and then write back and say, thanks for correcting me. But actually, sometimes you do get people to realize, like, oh, wait a minute, this guy's not just some liberal snowflake that, you know, likes John Lennon or something.
Yeah, I mean, I hate John Lennon. I mean,
no, I know. That's why I say that, because I'm a right-wing anarchist who likes John Lennon because I can sing like him. So go ahead.
Yes, I know you're a very talented musician, not me. No, look, I don't know. Well, look, I got a ton of friends that are soldiers because they know that I don't hate them. I'm not against them. And my books are not written like pandering to them or with soldiers as my audience or anything like that. But they can tell I'm not a commie. I'm a Ron Paul guy. Yeah. And that's good enough to listen to the truth from me. And then they all know it. You know, I saw one of the comments under the Tucker interview. A guy said, listen, I'm U.S. Army and I've essentially been at war for the last 25 years. And I could listen to this guy all day, you know, because he knows the stuff is right. As you said, I'm bringing up all these specifics. So he knows I'm not bluffing.
Right.
And I'm telling a coherent story that's more coherent than his colonels ever told him about why we're doing what we're doing over there. And it makes sense because it's right. And I get a lot of that.
And also, too, because like I would think that those guys would listen to you, like they would want to hear more about what you said than do their own research, because it's the kind of thing like if there's even a 5% chance that what this guy's saying is in the ballpark of being true, we're just cannon fodder over here. Like that's not the right, you know, they're not being hit by cannons. But you get what I'm saying? Like guys like Ted Cruz are deploying us and he didn't know what the hell, you know, his ass from his elbow.
Right.
And doesn't care whereas this guy, Scott Horton, if what he's saying is correct, then we're the ones, you know, suffering mostly. It's like the American people are, quote, paying for it by getting taxed or, you know, having prices go up. But it's obviously U.S. troops who are the ones literally on the front lines for this stuff. So, yeah, that's why if they hear that, they would want to know. It's like, I know a guy, Carlos Lara, he used to give a PowerPoint presentation for bankers showing them how fractional reserve banking works. And when he first told me that, I was like, what are you, out of your mind? Like, and he was going around like in 2008, 2009, giving this presentation. Like, I thought he was going to get stoned or something. And he said, no, they come up to me afterward and say, we had no idea we were doing that. Like they didn't even know. So,
That's so funny. Yeah, no, I've had at least 2 that I can think of off the top of my head, but definitely more than that. But 2 military intelligence officers who were, career guys over there, spent years and years over there, who came to me and told me, oh, yeah, enough already is right on. And I can verify virtually all of what you're saying. And plus, I learned a bunch too. But I know enough to know that you are not wrong about, any of what's going on.
Speaking of that.
Which, by the way, I'm just a radio host. I'm not a journalist. And I'm not really an author, right? I'm a names and dates guy. I'm good at remembering this stuff. But I learned all this stuff from working at antiwar.com and working for Justin Raimondo and doing 6,000 interviews of people who actually know what they're talking about. And then my job is just asking them what's going on. I learned from them. And so that's why my books are all full of citations and things like that, is because there's some original reporting in there, but very little. It's mostly just what I know from because I stayed home. Right? Like I could write a book about Somalia only if I went to Somalia and participated in any of that stuff as a journalist or a State Department employee or any kind of thing. But if I stay home, then I can write about all the wars, including Somalia, which is basically what I did. But I think in a sense then, like not to give legitimacy to Douglas Murray, but I think it is a fair point that people just naturally arises in people's mind. If you say, look, I wrote a book about Afghanistan, they go, well, were you a soldier there? Or were you a journalist over there? Or were you a State Department weenie over there? Or what the hell do you know about Afghanistan? And if you're telling me explicitly that you stayed home in Texas the whole time, then I really got to wonder, what could you possibly know about Afghanistan? Which I think is fair. You know what I mean? To at least wonder that. I hope people give me a chance and read the book or read the chapter and see what they think. But the way I looked at it, or still do, I guess, is that that's a kind of fair point, but I'm writing a broader story of the Afghan war rather than a very narrow one about some stuff that happened like just to the, if I went there and spent some time in Paktika, that'd be all I knew to write about. You know what I mean? So instead I stayed here and I wrote a book about 9 wars or 8 or you know what I mean? And I hope did a good enough job on those to at least get you through and get you to understand the broad strokes of what happened and why.
It's funny you say that. And because I host a lot of crossover episodes with this guy, Adam Heyman. And so when the Joe Rogan,
good friend of mine, of course.
Yeah. When the Dave Smith Murray thing dropped, I mean, for one thing, it's because I worked on my accent. I think among our people, if I work at it, I could probably do one of the best Douglas Murray impressions. I'm not going to do it now because I haven't practiced it. But
next karaoke night
So we were doing that, on that beat, as it were. And Adam, like for example, when Tucker, sprung the trap on Ted Cruz about the population and he didn't know, and then Adam was kind of saying, I mean, that was funny, but to me it had the same vibe. And I defended Tucker and still had my ire with Murray, and I said, no. That would be like imagine if Ted Cruz had correctly said the population, and then Tucker said, well, did you just go look that up on Wikipedia? And he said, well, yeah. He said, oh, so you didn't go over and do a census yourself, right? Like that would have been analogous to what Douglas Murray. Like, in other words, Murray didn't catch Dave saying something demonstrably false, right? And then say, why do you think that? And he's like, well, that's what the UNICEF report said. And it was like, oh, you didn't even go. You get what I'm saying? Like that would have been, but that wasn't Murray's point. It was just, oh, well, if you haven't been, why do we even need to listen to you? And in the context, it was like Murray was trying to argue that this whole blockade notion, as if the Israelis are somehow restricting food and supplies and people. That's just, have you been there and seen it? And I was like, no, but I've seen a lot of statistics and things about the flow of food in and out and people. And unless that's all just made up, and it's over the course of years too. So unless Murray went and did samples over the course of 5 years, his firsthand account couldn't possibly convey. So anyway, I'm going down a tangent. You get the point.
I do. And I'm not saying he had credibility in trying to debunk Dave and saying Dave doesn't know because he hasn't been there. But I'm just saying I understand why that's a natural kind of question for people when you tell them that you, especially, Dave's going on podcasts and arguing things. I wrote a book about Afghanistan. So it's a natural question. Well, what the hell do you know about Afghanistan? That's 9,000 miles from here or whatever.
And I appreciate, you're being humble and just like I just, as we're recording this, yesterday debated a guy, David Beckworth is his name, on the Fed and getting rid of it. And I realized
half of that last night.
Oh, okay.
I got it queued up for the rest.
Nice.
Yeah.
Incidentally, there was a myth. I can tell this here. I don't know. The audio, I had to do it on my phone. Like 20 minutes ahead of time, we go to log it, and it was just, I could see them. I couldn't hear them. And we tried all kinds of stuff, and they're like, Bob, you got to just do it on your phone. We got to go, you know? So that's why if the audio is not great, it's because I'm doing it on my phone. But anyway, on that, I realized too, like that guy Beckworth, he knows more. Like he teaches that stuff, you know,
and essentially agrees with you about.
Well, that was funny
it,
too.
right?
Yeah. But I realized they could have done a funny thing. Like if they had asked me, how many employees does the Fed have right now? And I didn't know. And I was like, oh, you want to abolish it? And you don't even, you know, and I was like, oh crap, I should go look this stuff up. But anyway, so that was kind of funny.
Yeah.
But you're right. I like your point there that there's a role for different people, right? So my sense is, yeah, I mean, I'm also the guy writing on private production of money and banking services and military. So for me, there's no way I could possibly know as much about the Fed as some guy whose job it is to teach grad students about the Fed every other semester. You know what I mean? There's no way,
also,
but I can be aware of the details by deferring to that guy.
Yeah, I mean, but your opponents have to defend counterfeiting. You're just arguing that they stop. It's the same thing here, where Douglas Murray is saying, trust me, man, I know why we got to kill all these people.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, I can tell you, I know enough to know that he's wrong. I'm not saying I went to college or that I know how to speak or read Arabic or any of this stuff. I am saying that I know enough to debunk this liar's claims, that's the job, you know?
Yeah. And on that too, it was, was Konstantin Kisin tried to make an analogy, because again, a lot of these guys were like trying to do PR recovery for the Murray debacle, as we would call it. And he said something, I'm paraphrasing, but this was, I think, correct, is he was, because the people with the Ted Cruz thing were saying, no, he should know how to, and then Kisin was trying to flip it and say, well, a lot of these people who are against, you know, U.S. intervention, they don't know the population of Iran either. And then people were trying to make the point you just made, like, and he was saying, well, no, I mean, like if a plumber comes to my house and says, we need to rip out all this stuff, and another guy comes and says, no, we don't, like they both need to know. And I was like, that's not the right analogy. Like if one guy says, I want to remove your kidney, and then, and I say, well, where is it in my body? He's like, well, I'm not sure. I'm not going to let him do it. Whereas if some other guy says, I don't think that's a good idea. And I say, point to me, where exactly is my kidney? He's like, well, I'm not exactly sure. Like, you know what I mean? Like, in other words, I can say that doesn't sound like a good idea, even if you don't know exactly. Whereas if you're the one proposing, let's take a scalpel and go take your kidney out, you better know exactly what you're talking about in a lot of the details.
Right.
So
exactly right.
All right. Well, I think we beat that to death.
Hell yeah. There's my excuse for living right there. I don't have to be an expert. I know enough. There.
Right. All the arguments we use against our opponents don't apply to us. I know that's not what we're saying, but that's what it comes off. Okay. So here's what I wanted to ask you. Again, I'm folks, I was listening. I was trying to think of stuff that I wonder about. And I got Scott here. I think a lot of people, they hear, I just listened to you and Daryl, and you're like, yeah, I mean, if you go look up these Israeli, and then also too, you're saying even these American contractors, they're handing out food to starving people, and then they're shooting at them. And you're even saying artillery. I think some people are like, that's too fantastical. Like, I just can't believe that. That can't be right. And so number one, and also, and I think part of it is I have seen debunked things, right? So on X, somebody will be circulating, you know, some image of dead babies and say, this just happened yesterday, these damn IDF. And then someone will, you know, community note it and say, this is a picture from, you know, 2812 or something. And so I think because there are some fake things, everyone just assumes that's, and then if the claim itself just sounds nutty, then they just say, come on, that can't be right. Yeah. And then I'll say too, if that really were happening, surely like the New York Times would tell me. It can't just be that everybody kind of knows this is going on, and yet the people in charge are just right. So can you respond to people who are thinking like that?
Well, on that last point, I'm sorry, I have not been reading the New York Times that much. I've been reading the Wall Street Journal a lot.
Okay, well, even if it's a Fox News kind of person, that they would say, those guys, I mean, they're hawkish and whatever, but they wouldn't be cool with American contractors just shooting into crowds of people. So they would tell me, like Sean Hannity or somebody would not be for this. So if it's, anyway, something like that.
Yeah. Well, Sean Hannity would ignore it. is what he would do.
Okay. But,
But look, there's just no question that this is true. We've been covering it at antiwar.com for weeks and weeks, going back for months. People can just search antiwar.com, and particularly Dave DeCamp's news coverage there at news.antiwar.com. But there's been all kinds of reporting about this. And last week, there was a big special report in Haaretz, which is the most important liberal daily in Israel, where they have direct testimony from the Israeli soldiers doing the killing, where it's just exactly as Norman Finkelstein said, like a mousetrap. They have these people under blockade. People are literally starving to death. Babies are starving to death on a regular basis there. And other people too are being deprived to death. You know, if you're severely malnourished and then you get what's typically just a cold or a flu, it can kill you, you know? You have, the population is severely weak and people are absolutely desperate and starving. And then they have this Israeli-controlled aid group that comes in to distribute food. And then the IDF officers have ordered their men to open fire on the crowds with no threat presented whatsoever.
And if I could stop you, Scott, that last part there is what's key. It's not just, there's some guys out there trying to just make sure people don't cut in the line, and then some teenagers come up and they start going for his gun, and then he overreacts and shoots him. That's not what we're talking about. No. These people are telling the reporters is our superiors gave us orders to shoot.
That's right. And then they even said that they radioed back, come on, are you sure? You want us to use artillery on these people? You have your orders. And then they do it. And they use artillery on crowds of men, women, and children desperately seeking wheat flour. That is not made up. That is for real. Okay, these are absolutely barbarian atrocities, the kind of thing that you would expect from some kind of tribal war between the Hmong and the Vietnamese or something, right? This is Oriental barbarianism. This has nothing to do with the rules of civilization of Western human society at all. It's the absolute rebellion against it. They have declared that these people are Amalek, which is this made-up Bible story about some race of people that Jehovah, the creator of the entire universe, ordered the ancient Hebrews to exterminate every last man, woman, and child, and oxen too. Their babies and oxen too. And Netanyahu has instructed, this wasn't just some statement, he instructed in a speech to the officers of the IDF, the enemy is Amalek. And you know what God said to do to Amalek. Now, nobody believes that God actually whispered to Netanyahu, hey, remember that story about Amalek? Well, that applies to these Palestinians right now too. It's just a bunch of made up crap. Even if you believe every word of the Bible from 3,000 years ago, there's no one who's pretending that Jehovah has instructed the IDF to do this now. It's just Prime Minister Netanyahu who has invoked this Bible story. And they kill people absolutely, every day. It's the Waco massacre or 2 or 3 every single day. And you can read our coverage at antiwar.com. In fact, there's one of the major stories on antiwar.com today it's the picture story. Israeli airstrike slaughters 10 children waiting for nutritional aid near a medical clinic. And there's no Hamas anywhere around. I interviewed this Australian war analyst expert, Matt Williams. And he talked about, and I should follow up and get his direct citation for this. I'm sure it's easy enough to find, where he says, in the American terror wars, and he fought in Afghanistan, with the Americans in the last war there. He says, their rules are, for a low value target, you can kill 10 innocent civilians. For a high value target, you can kill 30. The Israelis' rules are you can kill up to 300 innocent civilians in the name of trying to kill one high-value target. So, in other words, they treat the people of Palestine as though their lives are worth less than livestock, right? Like they're just insects to be exterminated. They have adopted the value system of the German National Socialists. And they are, right now, the defense minister, Katz, has announced that what they're going to do, Bob, is they're going to build a camp where the city of Rafah used to be. And then they're going to concentrate all the people of the Gaza Strip there. as they've annihilated their entire society, bombed their cities to absolute rubble, bombed all their schools and universities and hospitals and all their government offices with all their land records and family histories, and everything has been completely obliterated. And then they're going to herd them into this, quote, concentration camp, end quote, and then urge them to voluntarily emigrate, right? This is purely criminal, purely evil, and purely illegal. Under the Geneva Conventions, under the UN Charter, under every treaty America's signed for the last 150 years. You cannot do this. And yet they can, because they have America's support to do it. And,
Okay.
and they claim self-defense while they slaughter babies.
Let me just pull two things out of that. So you said Haaretz so this is not like, oh, well, that's what the Hamas Ministry of News told us, and we're just quoting him because that's what we do over here at antiwar.com. It's just write down verbatim whatever Hamas says in their press release. So Haaretz, for me who don't know, what is Haaretz? Like, what's the analog for the United States?
The New York Times. It's the New York Times of Israel. It's the most important liberal daily in Israel.
Okay.
So like if the Jerusalem Post is the Washington Times, then Haaretz is the New York Times.
Okay. And so that's where you're saying they're covering this. They're the ones saying, and again, it's not.
In the article I have here, the article is called "It's a Killing Field." That's a quote. It's a killing field. IDF soldiers ordered to shoot deliberately at unarmed Gazans waiting for humanitarian aid. Okay. IDF officers and soldiers told Haaretz they were ordered to fire at unarmed crowds near food distribution sites in Gaza, even when no threat was present.
Right.
Hundreds of Palestinians have been killed, prompting the military prosecution to call for a review into possible war crimes. So there's how made up it is. The IDF is launched a criminal or preliminary investigation to see whether they're going to prosecute people for this, which of course they won't. But they have, let me see if I can find a couple of direct quotes from you here of these soldiers talking to Haaretz. "It's a killing field," one soldier said. "Where I was stationed, between 1 and 5 people were killed every day. They're treated like a hostile force. No crowd control measures, no tear gas, just live fire with everything imaginable. Heavy machine guns, grenade launchers, mortars. Then, once the center opens, the shooting stops and they know they can approach. Our form of communication is gunfire." And there's another story from, get this. He says, they have the thing is called Operation Salted Fish, because salted fish is the name of the Israeli version of the children's game Red Light, Green Light. Remember playing that when you were 5? Red light, green light, little kid. So there it's called the salted fish. So this is how they tell them it's okay for you to come forward and get food, or it's not, is by killing them, is by firing artillery at them, firing mortars at them, firing machine guns at them, in order to tell them, not yet, back off, and just kill 5 or 10. And then they go, okay, now you can come and get your food. And then they stop shooting them for a little while, unless they feel like shooting them some more. There's another thing that we had yesterday or 2 days ago on antiwar.com, where just like in Vietnam, it's a free fire zone. The officers have declared if any person is between this line and this line, you kill them. And even if it's a child, even if it's a 10-year-old boy on a bicycle, you blow his head off. Those are your standing orders. Kill anything that moves.
Okay. So the next question people might have is to say, why would they give those orders? Like what function does that serve? And I think you alluded, like, is it just, to me, it's obvious when you see the footage and stuff of just the leveled, as far as the eye can see, that this is not, we're trying to root out Hamas. This is, we want these people to take the hint and just leave.
Yes.
Is that what it is? Is that as simple as that they're just trying to get them to say, what are you guys doing? Get out of here.
That's right. It's far worse than anything Slobodan Milosevic and the Bosnian Serbs ever did to the Bosnian Muslims. Far worse. And they've killed high tens of thousands of people. Everybody goes, Hamas's numbers. Hamas is, the Gaza Health Ministry's numbers are low. They've been lowballing it this whole time. They don't count the missing among the dead. And they got names of, last I saw it was like 949 babies who died before they made it to their first birthday. So when you go through the list of the tens of thousands of people whose names they have of people who've been killed, which is the official number is almost 60,000. But when you go through that, it's pages and pages and pages and pages before you even get to the first 1-year-old. It's a genocide. It is a genocide. You're not supposed to wait until after it's 5.8 million people dead and then go, oh, I guess that was a genocide. The point of a genocide, and genocide doesn't just mean massacres either. Mm-hmm. It's the deliberate attempt to destroy a society, a civilization. And that's exactly what they're doing, is bombing them off the face of the earth to encourage, as they lovingly and hilariously call it, their voluntary emigration after the Israelis have completely destroyed the entire basis for the sustainment of human life on that property. And why? It's simply because they covet that property. That's it. And here's the bad news, Bob, is they don't even care about the Gaza Strip. The Israelis want to steal the West Bank. And I bet you dollars to dimes, dollars to dimes, that
I was gonna say, I'm not gonna take dimes to dollars.
Yeah, I mean, dollars ain't worth much these days anyway, but
they're worth more than dimes. They're worth like 10 times as much.
That's true. But I bet you that they're going to end up just carpet bombing Jenin and Hebron and Ramallah and Bethlehem too, and force the Palestinians out of the West Bank. They're going to annex it. They're going to kill those people. They're going to take that land. Even though supposedly the God of the entire universe told them you should not kill people and you should not covet other people's property and you should not steal it. But instead, they get to do whatever they want.
Hey everybody, Bob Murphy here with a quick tip for small business owners. If your business isn't showing up online, your competitors are getting the leads and you're missing out. Well, that's where Persist SEO comes in. For over 15 years, they've been helping local businesses grow through SEO, paid ads, and the latest in AI-powered search optimization, so you stay visible and competitive in the digital age. Whether you're in-home services, legal, or healthcare, Persist SEO delivers real results without locking you into long-term contracts or overwhelming you with tech jargon. Visit ineedseo.help or call 770-580-3736 to schedule your free consultation. That's ineedseo.help. Easy to remember, powerful for your business. Well, I saw the Netanyahu, the quote of him just saying Amalek. Is he even religious?
No, of course not.
Okay, that's why that's surprised. I mean, again, I know I should stop being surprised, but no. I would have thought that might be offensive to the genuinely Orthodox, that if he's like invoking their thing, or maybe it was and he didn't care. Like, what are they going to do?
Yeah, I mean, and look, and here's the thing too. And look, man, I'm like the furthest thing from a one world communist that you ever met, man. I used to pal around with them Birchers a hell of a lot, and I agree with them about a lot of things. But I'm not even saying there should be an international criminal court. Mm-hmm. What I am saying is that people should read the International Criminal Court's initial statement about the potential. They were saying, essentially trying to issue an injunction saying there's a potential genocide going on here. And people should just read that, because what it is it's full of quotes of Israeli officials making their intent clear. And this is part of the legal code of genocide, is stated intent. What are they trying to do? When the Hutus say, come on, everybody, let's kill all the Tutsis, then we know that they're doing it on purpose when they kill 400,000 of them, and that they're trying to kill the rest too. They said so. Same thing here. And, the problem is, it's just as you introduce the subject here, it's just cognitive dissonance. Mm. If the Israeli regime is the most criminal and violent and murderous regime on the planet, then how come America does whatever they say? How come we're their greatest allies? Because everybody knows we're the good guys. Mm-hmm. We wouldn't help evil men accomplish evil things. But sorry, everybody. America's the world empire, and Israel is the worst thing about our country right now. By far. It is the worst thing, and it's going to get more of our towers knocked down, or the equivalent too. Just like September 11th was revenge for Israel murdering little babies on your dime. And just like, for that matter, Boston and Orlando and San Bernardino and Fort Hood and the rest, all these domestic terrorist attacks are because of America serving Israel's interest over there. bombing the Iraqis, bombing the Syrians, supporting the Israelis, bombing the Palestinians and the Lebanese.
Are you talking about the Boston Marathon attack? That one? Is that what you meant? Okay.
Yeah. It's all blowback from American foreign policy.
Okay, let me shift gears here because I did have some other ones I wanted to ask you about.
Sure.
I kept hearing references to this so it was in the lead up to the invasion of Iraq, under George W. Bush, that someone came over to testify before Congress about, the horrible things they were doing, like incubators and stuff. Wait, am I getting mixed up or is this the first one? It's where it was the Kuwaiti guys.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes,
Tell me, give me the
correct.
snapshot, and then I have a follow up. But just set the scene because I'm bouncing around.
No problem. Okay, so Saddam invades Kuwait.
Yes.
At somewhat American invitation and not very tough warnings in early August of 1990.
Yes.
In October, the ambassador's daughter testifies before Congress that she was a nurse in Kuwait City in the hospital there, and that she saw Iraqi soldiers dump Kuwaiti premature babies out of their incubators and leave them on the cold floor to die just to steal their incubators or just to kill the babies and destroy the incubators for fun or whatever, which is a completely fake, ridiculous hoax. She wasn't even in the country at the time, nor was she a nurse. The whole thing was completely made up, never happened, 100% false lie. And they use that to beat everybody over the head to get them to support invading Iraq in order to reverse the invasion of Kuwait, which, by the way, you know what the Israelis did, Bob? They forced the doctors at one of the hospitals in Gaza to abandon premature babies in their incubators. But they swore, and the doctors said, no, we're not leaving. They said, listen, we're going to kill you. We're going to kill all of y'all if you don't get out of there. But we promise that we will take possession of those babies and we will protect them. And then you know what they did, Bob? They didn't do that. And they let every single one of those premature babies die. That's a true story from Israel's genocide in Gaza, which a lie somewhat approaching that was good enough to start our 35-year war against Iraq.
Okay.
But we're on Israel's side in Gaza. But anyway, so they use that lie.
Well, can I just ask you that? People, they say, but that is astonishing to me. So it was the Kuwaiti ambassador's daughter.
Yeah.
Lying and saying, I'm a nurse. I was a nurse and I was over there. So what I want to know is, like, the people in Congress hearing her tell this story, did they know, oh yes, that's the Kuwaiti ambassador's daughter, but she also happens to be a nurse? Or did they not even know?
I don't know for sure, but I bet you Tom Lantos knew. He was the one holding the hearing, and he was the Israel First guy for sure. Foreign agent disguised as an American representative. And so I accuse him.
No. So I said that wrong. What I mean is...
And it was Hill and Knowlton who came up with it. I mean, the whole thing was a scam it was the guy who had helped run Bush's
But wait.
campaign.
I want to understand, like, as it was being broadcast on C-SPAN or whatever, I'm saying, did it say whatever the girl's name was, daughter of the Kuwaiti ambassador?
Oh, no.
That's what I'm getting at. It was it was not presented as if it were the Kuwaiti ambassador's daughter,
she was just a nurse,
which you would think is kind of irrelevant to assess how much validity should we give to this narrative.
No, they were
so
lying.
that's my question is, so clearly it was presented, and then what I'm trying to get a sense of is, did everybody in the room hearing that know full well we're putting on a show for the American public, or
Probably.
were some of them okay? That was the part I wanted to just get your sense
I'm not
of.
exactly sure, which congressmen were told how badly they wanted to believe or what. But I mean, you got to hold them responsible for their staff not verifying that.
Well, that's what I mean. Yeah, at the very least, you would have to say, like, if you're just a regular, American watching, hearing us say this, once, and by all means, folks, go verify that we're not just making stuff up. Once you find out that that's true, like, you'd have to say, holy crap, like, they didn't have that would be, like the thing where they caught the news. You remember when there was a plane crash from a Chinese airliner or something like that, and some people hoaxed and called in and said the pilot's name was We Too Low or something that. Did you ever hear that? And it's they're saying it on the air, and then, like, you can tell that the host or the anchors are like, oh, wait a minute, and they realize because somebody called them and, like, pretended to be from the FAA or something. That's how that happened, and they didn't bother to check, right? So I'm saying with this, it's like, at the very least, you would say to let someone come and testify to Congress about what they saw first, and nobody bothered to check, like, is this person just making this story up? And that's, that's inconceivable, and yet that happened. So
well, here's the funnier part,
Yeah.
is 2 years later, in the spring of 1993, as your entire audience has heard, the Iraqis tried to kill H.W. Bush with a truck bomb in Kuwait.
Mm-hmm.
Except that lie was told by that little girl's father. The same guy who had drummed up her hoax then was the same guy who drummed up the hoax, the fake hoax, which I bet no one in your audience has ever heard before. That, man, that's not true. Everybody knows that that's true. Everybody knows that's why W. Bush wanted to go to war.
Right.
It was because you tried to kill my daddy and all of that stuff. Not true. Total bull. It was just a whiskey smuggling ring that this guy embellished into a truck bomb plot against Bush Sr., which was crucial because, as you might remember, Bill Clinton launched a cruise missile attack against Baghdad and killed a bunch of innocent people, including a famous artist, whose name, Layla Al-Attar, I believe was her name, the famous artist that he murdered. And then he also then adopted the Israelis' policy of American dual containment of Iraq and Iran from permanent bases in Saudi Arabia, the single most important cause of Al-Qaeda's turn against the United States of America.
Okay.
On the occasion of that hoax.
3 other quick ones too that I want to get here while I got you, and we have to go fast because I want to get these in, and we got the time. Another one is, I hear it bandied about, when we say John McCain is palling around with neo-Nazis in Ukraine, is that a figure of speech?
Oh no.
So what does that mean?
Well, look, I think, we have all kind of heard of this in general terms, right? That there were people in Eastern Europe who were happy to welcome the Nazis, to liberate them from the communists when the Nazis got there. And then usually the story goes, and then they kind of found out that, this ain't much better. You know what I mean? Well, that's the story of Ukraine. They had been enslaved under the Soviet communists, starved by the millions to death under Stalin's attempted economic program there. And when the Nazis came, especially in what is now far western Ukraine, what was then far eastern Poland, the oblasts, they call them, of Galicia and Volhynia, there were some extremely right-wing nationalists who sided with Hitler and who actually tried to form a state, declare independence, and be recognized as an ally by Hitler's government. It was probably a huge blunder of the Nazis that they didn't take them up on it. But instead said, no way, you guys are a bunch of Slavs. Like, we're not gonna help you build a state, even no matter how much you love us, kind of thing was their attitude. But they did recruit a lot of these guys to serve in their auxiliary militias, and including what was later called the UPA. It was the OUN, the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists, and then later it was the UPA, which forgive me on the spot, I forgot the. I forgot. Anyway, and they were essentially, you've heard of Stepan Bandera, and there are a few other of his guys, and they are essentially beginning even before the Soviet Union fell, but with Glasnost and Perestroika, a lot of I'm sorry, I skipped a step here. After World War II, the CIA backed these guys, and the military backed these guys in an insurgency against the Soviets based out of the Carpathian Mountains, and backed them until Khrushchev crushed them in, I think, 52. I always forget. I need to go back and look if it was 52 or 54. When did Stalin die and Khrushchev come and succeed him? That was in 54, right?
I don't know.
Anyway.
It was after he would, or no. It was
so
before
he
was banging the shoe.
Yeah.
Say, we'll bury you. I'm
right.
Kidding,
so, but anyway, so the CIA backed these guys for a time, and then and stopped and continue to back them, at least in Europe, until 59. But then with the beginning of Glasnost and Perestroika, a bunch of the Nazis who had been given, green cards or even citizenship in Canada and the United States started to come back. And they don't have any heroes. So they tried to make Stepan Bandera and his men into the George Washingtons of Ukraine and kind of rewrote all of Ukrainian history as, with these guys as the heroes of Ukrainian nationalism. The problem is that they were guilty as hell of murdering hundreds of thousands of innocent Poles and Jews in the Holocaust. And these guys are, nobody's heroes other than, complete nuts. And in fact, it's funny because sometimes, they work so hard to rehabilitate these guys and say, no, they fought against the commies and the Nazis, and they're just heroic patriots and all of this kind of thing. And then and in fact, they rescued the Jews. They love the Jews so much, by the way, and this kind of thing. But then every once in a while, one of their leaders will say, stop saying those lies. Our heroes were too a bunch of Hitler-loving, Jew-hating, Nazi murderers, and that's why we love them so much, and all of this kind of thing. It keeps coming up. So they keep trying to rehabilitate these guys, but then they can't because the people who really worship them are as evil as they were, right? And so, and they were a huge part of the history of the war because after Obama overthrew the government in the beginning of 2014, when and sent John Brennan to go and insist that the government attack the dissidents in the east of the country, half the military broke off and switched sides and joined with the Eastern rebels. And then the rest of the military was completely unprepared to fight them. So then what they do? They rounded up all the neo-Nazis who had helped to complete the overthrow of the government in February, and they essentially merged them together and formed a new group called the Azov Battalion to go and fight the war. And some of the first things that they did was go and deliberately murder civilians in order to drum up the tension and prevent the initial peace talks that were taking place in Geneva at that time. And they were the ones who really were the vanguard who started the war on the side of Kiev. And this is Barack Obama's government that did this. And they were avowed Hitler-loving Nazis, and everybody knew that the vanguard of the protest movement beginning in the very end of November 2013 and through December, January, and February, everybody knew that the vanguard of the protest movement were Nazis. They were avowed fascists. And I'm not talking about, because American liberals call everybody to the right of Bernie Sanders a fascist.
That's what I was going to say. That it's not because they favored a slowdown in the growth of Medicaid spending. When we say fascist, like you mean actual fascist.
That's right. And I quote them at length talking about, the nation is one organism and it must be racially pure and we must have all of these. It's standard, like Hitlerian fanaticism, right? There's, and I quote them at length. People might be familiar with probably the most prominent quote of these guys that gets passed around because it's just so catchy is a guy who's currently a great hero of the Ukrainian military in the fight. He runs the Azov Battalion is now called the 3rd Separate Infantry Division, and he's their leader. His name is Andriy Beletsky, and he's most famous for his quote about, we must lead the white race in our crusade against the Semite-led Untermenschen, that is the subhumans. But if you go, and I did, and dig hard, you can find the Wayback Machine archive of the Azov Battalion website where that entire speech was published. And it's completely nuts, right? About the Aryan values of supremacy and racial hierarchy and the living organism of the state where every sperm and every egg belongs to the government in order to it's as fanatical Nazism as straight out of the encyclopedia. This is what actual ass Nazis talk and sound like, right? Not like Republicans.
Right.
Okay.
And again, just the original thing that made me ask you that was that you hear people say stuff like, a lot of our neocon guys and like guys like John McCain are over there paling around with actual neo-Nazis. Like that's what you're talking about. So it's not just we're not just exaggerating and engaging in hyperbole.
Well, and in fact, you could just type in McCain Tannybok, Tanhybok, and there they are. And who's Tannybok? Well, he's the leader of the Social National Party.
Huh.
Get it? I mean, I don't know what you want me to say. Oh, look, there's another picture of Tannybok with his hand up in a Nazi salute. And I don't mean in a Elon Musk accidentally got you, but like, no, actually hailing Hitler with the giant lightning bolts behind him. I mean, that's who these guys are. And they're directly descendant, as I show in the book in meticulous detail, because the burden of proof obviously is on me when I'm rebunking these supposedly debunked myths that I show in great detail how these groups are directly descended from the OUN and UPA that served Hitler in the Second World War.
Okay. I got another one for you. And the folks, I didn't say the point here, Scott, what I'm doing is grabbing stuff where I want people just to say, like, if they just are worried that you're just insane or the best liar they've ever heard, or people like you, that just, I want to grab isolated things where it's like, if this holds up, you go do your due diligence, then you know something's screwy, just like with that ambassador thing. Like, even if you think everybody in Congress had the wool pull over their eyes, like, they didn't bother checking who this was. That's insane.
And so, look, I mean, I have a conflict of interest, but it's just true. Read antiwar.com every day.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You couldn't make this stuff up. Read antiwar.com, read the Libertarian Institute, do your work, and you will know, and you'll catch up quick. Just start reading, forget even the bottom of the page. Just read the top headlines on antiwar.com every day for a month, and then see where you're at.
Yeah. Okay. Here's another one that I don't know if you made the point or if I was listening to Daryl do it on his reflections on Ukraine thing. But Victoria Nuland, there was some leaked phone call where she's picking cabinet positions or something. Can you just explain what that is? Like, to say it correctly, because I'm just making stuff up here, and then explain the significance of that.
Okay, so the phone call is between Victoria Nuland, who was then the Deputy Secretary of State for European Affairs, which is sort of like ambassador at large to the European Union. And she's on the phone with Jeffrey Pyatt, who was the ambassador to Ukraine.
What year is this? What administration?
I believe it was posted in early February or maybe like the second week in February of 2014. And the discussion is about the three major leaders of the protest movement on the Maidan. And that's Tanny Bach, the Nazi from the Social Nationalist Party. And then Arseny Yatsenyuk, who's from the Fatherland Party, which is also a pretty right-wing nationalist party, although not avowedly fascist, and closely tied to Yulia Tymoshenko, the gas princess, they call her, from, I'm sorry, I forgot, Ukro Energy, or I forgot how to say the name of her company. But anyway, Yulia Tymoshenko's party. And then the other major leader is Vitaly Klitschko, who was a heavyweight boxer. Is pretty famous. He has a brother. I don't know if they're twins or they're just close brothers who participate in politics and were, I think, both boxers. And this is the one that ended up becoming the mayor of Kiev. So they're discussing these three, and they're discussing a proposal by the sitting president, Yanukovych. And essentially what's happening is he is giving in to them and is willing to essentially fire his government and hire the protest leaders as prime minister and all that to run his regime. And he agrees to early elections, they're trying to get him to agree to early elections and to let the protest leaders come into his government. So this is essentially what they're trying to accomplish. This is the coup they're trying to accomplish, is to force the guy essentially to step down and accept his opponent's rule, even under his sort of oversight or whatever in his time remaining in power. And so in the conversation, she is saying, listen, Tanny Bach and Klitschko aren't ready for mainstream politics. What we want to do, we want to keep Klitschko on the outside, and we want to have Tanny Bach training him up and getting him used to, what kind of position of power he might eventually end up in. But he isn't ready yet, and Tanny Bach isn't either. But Yats is the guy, she says. Yatsenyuk is the one with the experience, who had been the former leader of the central bank. He's the one who should be the prime minister. And so what we're going to do is we're going to hold this meeting, and we're going to go in there. We're going to make it real clear to Tanny Bach that he needs to stand out of the way. And he's going to be the complicated electron here, she says. He's going to be the one who wants to argue about it. And we just need to make it clear that we have decided this is how it's going to be. And so she is just clearly calling the shots here. And as they say, in the discussion. We have to glue this thing. We had to midwife it. We have to make it sail. We have to get it to stick before Putin has a chance to figure out how to torpedo it. So they are clearly running this thing. Now, the point about the coup is that it's like another 2 weeks after the phone call is leaked, which is probably a week or two after it was recorded. At the end of February, about the 20th, 21st, when all the sniping and all that starts, which is a whole other subject, but I cover it in the book, about all the questions about what was going on there. But they take the opportunity of the heightened crisis on the Maidan to have the Americans support an EU push to get the president of Ukraine, Yanukovych, to finally sign the deal to allow them to take over his government and to stand for an early election by the end of the year. So then the leaders of the protest movement who signed that document, they go back to the Maidan and they say, okay, we have a deal. And under the deal, we're going to get to take power and he's going to stand for election by the end of the year. And at that point, a young neo-Nazi named Parasyuk, who is the same guy who admitted, and I have 3 or 4 different sources of this who directly interviewed the guy, BBC, Al Jazeera, and IntelliNews, and one other, who all talked to this guy. He was the one who led the snipers at the Music Conservatory, murdering cops the morning before, helping to start the big violent conflict on the Maidan that morning. Same guy is the one who runs up on the stage and grabs the microphone and says, we reject this deal. We don't take this deal. We don't take any deal where the criminal remains in office. And in fact, now that I'm at it, if he doesn't leave town by 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, I'm going to kill him myself. And we know this is a guy with rifles. He's been using them, killing cops, and admitted it. So then the next morning, what happens is or even that night, or, late into the night and early the next morning, the Nazi militias then go to seize the rest of the government buildings. Now, part of the deal that Yanukovych had signed agreed to pull his police back from the Maidan, and as long as the protesters promised to go home too. Yeah, right. So he pulls his forces back. Now the momentum is with them. They start taking over all of the major government buildings in downtown Kiev, and then I don't know exactly why, but the senior police officers fled. And then the lower ones did too. And everybody just got the hell out of town. And the Nazis ended up sacking and taking over the government buildings. And by the way, when the police ended up rousting them out of there later in the day, they went and fled to the Canadian embassy, where they had such good connections there, as the Nazis did. And you might remember where in the Canadian Parliament, they all celebrated this guy. They go, this guy was a great war hero. He fought against the Russians in World War II. And everybody went, wait, what? he fought on whose side in World War II again? And then it turns out that he had been a member of the Gestapo. He had been, part of the SS Galician Division under Heinrich Himmler. So, you know how it goes.
Yeah. Okay, but so thank you for that.
Heroes.
But the point that, what I had, again, I don't know if it was you made it or Daryl, but of that phone was because the people, when guys like you are trying to say all this stuff in this new Cold War, medium hot war now with Russia, we're provoking it and whatever. And look we went in and we had this coup and we did this and that. And they're like, what are you talking about? The Americans didn't, this was just a spontaneous. And so that was like a trump card to say, what are you talking about? We got on the phone, Victoria Nuland plotting the new government. Or we're like, so this isn't just the Americans are giving some money to some people in Greenpeace or something, or you get what I'm saying? Like that was one of the significant pieces of significance of this to show, come on, the Americans were hip deep in this overthrowing of the previous regime.
Right. And in fact, I quote in the book people who are, harsh critics of Vladimir Putin. Like, for example, Dan Murphy of the Christian Science Monitor is no fan of Vladimir Putin whatsoever. But then he says in there, like, come on, guys, we got to be honest about what we're listening to here. She's not observing events. She's calling the shots here. She's deciding who's going to take what position in the new regime. and which is completely contrary to what they said that they were doing here.
Right.
And I have, other sources that I quote like that too. And, where it's the kind of people who you would expect to play this down say, well, look, in this case, this is some pretty bad overreach here about, what's going on. And I have to say, like, yes, it was, as I stipulated there, it was the Nazis on the ground who did a street putsch that finally overthrew the government. That's the German word for it. I asked the damn chat GPT thing, and there's like 10 different kinds of coups in French. So there's a coup de judiciary, and there's a coup d'etat, which is usually like a general taking over. Then there's a coup de electoral shenanigans, and a coup de Joe Biden and George Soros throw in $100 million and send in the CIA to help, and a coup de whatever you want to call it. In this case, it's a coup de Robert Kagan's disgusting fat wife getting in there and calling the shots and deciding who's going to run the new government in Ukraine. And we already have her on the record where she's been, holding these meetings with Yanukovych and browbeating him for hours at a time. She announced in a speech on December 13th, 2013 at the Ukraine Foundation in Washington with a big Chevron logo behind her. Yeah, I just got back from Ukraine where I sat in a meeting with Yanukovych where I beat him over the head and told him he better do exactly what we say and all of these things. So for people who want to say that, like whatever you're hearing in that phone call, she's not picking a new president. She's picking who's going to run the government for the sitting president for the rest of his term, which she's demanding he leave early. Well, whatever, man. America's the world empire, and they're clearly having their way with Ukraine and forcing this guy out of power. And at the same time, for 3 months, bankrolling the neo-Nazis' giant protest movement out there, which culminated in a street putsch that was, again, decided by the Nazis. I'm not saying the CIA told Paris Yuk to get up there and threaten to murder the president. I'm just saying the entire thing was an American operation in which these Nazis came to the front and got their dirty work done. And so is Robert Kagan's entire family responsible for that? Yes.
Okay.
They're the most pro-Hitler Jews in all of American history.
Okay, that's a provocative way to end.
And that goes for his disgusting fat neck brother Fred and his ridiculously horse-toothed, disgusting wife Kimberly Kagan from the Institute for the Study of War. And I think their father Donald is finally dead, but may he burn in hell too.
Well, we don't know what his religious views were, Scott. So, all right. Well,
That's
thank
true.
you, Scott, for that impassioned discussion there. Folks, my guest has been Scott Horton.
Sorry. I should have had more coffee or less coffee before this thing this morning.
Lots of things to follow Scott on. He's the director of Libertarian Institute. As he said, go check them out. His book, Provoked, his new podcast with Daryl Cooper, also called Provoked. I'm going to link folks to Scott's recent appearance on Tucker Carlson, where he just goes for 3 hours with Tucker just periodically saying, "Is that true? That really happened?"
And I didn't get all ranty in that interview the way I did in this one.
Well, you're among friends here, and you could let
and
your
he
guard
didn't
down
ask
a bit.
me about Gaza. We didn't have
right.
time for that.
Right. So, okay, joking aside, thanks, Scott, for everything you've been doing and for your time here today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Bob.
And thanks, folks, for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
You've just experienced another episode of The Bob Murphy Show, the podcast promoting free markets, free minds, and grateful souls. For more information and to subscribe to this podcast, visit bobmurphyshow.com.